Magic, Chapter 7. It was black dark outside, but I was still awake. Even though me and Jay had gone to bed, I couldn't sleep, so I stared out the window. The moon shone round and full in the deep night sky. I could hear Jay's raggedy breathing, not snoring, he said, coming from his side of the room. To me, it was still our birthday until the sun came up, and that's what I was thinking about. I thought something amazing was going to happen when we started to learn about our family magic, that I would find some special magic inside me. Instead, it seemed like Root had only stirred a bunch of bad things up. Deputy Collins continued to creep around, Letty getting everyone in class to laugh at me. Whatever had happened in the marsh, it seemed like things would be a lot easier if I just gave it up. And at that moment, I really wanted something to be easy. I sighed and turned on my back, my long cotton nightdress twisting around my knees. That's when something moved near the window. It must have been a cloud over the moon, but I could have sworn I'd seen Dinah move. I rubbed my eyes and looked at her again. She was as still as ever, sitting on the windowsill where I placed her. Another shadow flicked across the window. I squinted, looking at Dinah really close. When I leaned her against the windowsill earlier, I had arranged her new dress so the little pleats lay flat in neat rows, the way Mama had pressed them. Now those pleats were spread wide, like Dinah had swung her gunny-sack legs. I gasped, then pressed my lips together to keep the sound in. My heart beat faster. Maybe it was the wind. Me and Jay left the window cracked at night so cool air could creep in. I stared at Dinah in the darkness, unblinking until my eyes got dry and itchy. There was no more movement, and soon I let my eyes close, once, then twice. I was about to close them again when I heard the brush of stiff cotton. I held myself still, but limp, the slit in my eyelids just wide enough to see through. Dinah was moving. It was a small movement at first. She sat up. Then a minute later, she turned her head one way, then the other. Then she looked right at me before she pushed her little brown cloth arms around her stiff, stuffed body and stood up. She looked at the dress, and her red-stitched mouth wiggled back and forth as if she couldn't decide whether she liked her new outfit. I froze where I lay. The sheet on top of me felt heavy as a winter blanket holding me in place on the bed. I fought the need to run, breathe slow and deep to stay calm. Did this have something to do with whatever had grabbed me in the marsh? Had a real honest-to-goodness Hank gotten inside my doll? Carefully, Dinah lowered herself down onto the thin bedspread. Her weight didn't make a dent in the material until both feet were planted and firm. Then she made her way, foot over foot, swaying like a drunk squirrel, to the edge of the bed. Part of me was scared to move, because she would know I was pretending, but the other part of me had to watch. I made a slight snoring sound and turned over in the bed like I was getting settled. Dinah's steps halted for a moment, then she hightailed it out of the room. I couldn't believe it. I shook my head and rubbed my eyes, thinking I might be dreaming, so I pinched myself and looked at the windowsill. It was still empty. A squeak from the front of the house told me the screen door had opened and closed. "Jay, wake up," I said in a loud whisper. He continued to breathe deep. I got up, my bare feet soft on the wood floor, and shook him. "Wake up!" When he didn't move, I pinched him, then covered his mouth with my hand. When he yelped, "Shh," I told him, pulling on his arm. "Listen, we need to go outside." His eyes were slits of white in the darkened room. He was mad at me for waking him up. "Huh? Why?" "Dinah's gone." He scratched at his belly under his white t-shirt. "Somebody thief her?" "No, nobody stole her. She got up and left." Before he could call me crazy, I jumped back on my bed and pointed out the window. "Look!" Jay cut his eyes at me, but he got up. He crawled out of his bed, tiptoed across the room, and kneeled down on mine. "I can't get why. Lord, a fire!" Dinah was making her way down the dusty path from the house, waddling like one of our chickens. His mouth dropped open. He must have truly been shocked, because he didn't even come back with a smart-mouth comment. It was one of the only times I'd ever seen him with nothing to say. He pointed outside. "I told you," I hissed as we pressed our faces up against the window. Where was she headed? The marsh? Finally, my brother found his voice. "What kind of mess is this? Did you make her walk?" His voice was too loud, and I shushed him before I answered. "No, how could I?" "Do you think it's a haint?" "I don't know. But they ain't real, are they, Jez?" "I don't know," I said again. I was scared when I first saw Dinah move, but now I was curious. Gran had breathed into that doll, for me. I wasn't about to let some haint run away from her, whether they were real or not. "We have to follow her." "What?" He shook his head while he waved his hands in front of his face. "Not me. Dolls walking in the middle of the night. Leave me out of this." I tugged at his arm. "We have to. What if she's off to tell Doc about today?" "Then that'll be good. He can deal with whatever it is. I don't want to get mixed up with no walking dolls." He got up and scrambled back over to his bed. "I'm going to stay nice and safe right here. Suppose she gets torn up by dogs or something." Jay groaned and put his pillow over his head. "Well, I'm going out there," I said, putting my socks and shoes on. "You better come too, because if I get hurt, first thing Mama and Doc are going to ask is why you didn't go with me." He pulled the pillow down from his face. "Fine." He yanked his overalls on over his nightclothes and stuck his feet in his shoes. Then he grabbed a flashlight from his milk crate. "You're going to need something to see with. You ain't no cat." I took the small hurricane lamp off my bed table, went to the kitchen, and lit it with a match. Then he eased the door open and crept outside. Jay turned on his flashlight. He muttered, "Looking for daggone doll footprints in the moonlight. No sense in that." "We're going to check the cabin, then check at the marsh," I told him. With that, he snuck to Doc's cabin quiet as he could. He wasn't there. He'd been working because there were bowls of root cuttings and such on the table, but there was no sign of him now. There was no sign of Dinah either. So from there we headed towards the marsh. "You sure you want to do this?" Jay asked. "Considering?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah, I'm okay." A gust of wind came through the dark and brought the night to life. It rustled the leaves on the trees. The stalks of corn and bean made a shushing sound. Crickets, frogs, and other night creatures chirped. Clouds covered the moon and stars. I couldn't see anything beyond the single line of light from Jay's flashlight. My lamp flickered. My heartbeat felt like it was pounding in my head. I could hear my blood rushing back through my body. An owl hooted. Long grasses rustled, tickling our ankles. We marched quietly towards the marsh, the evening air steamy, making sure we stayed on the path. We were past our crops when Jay went still next to me. "What?" I asked, leaning to look over his shoulder. "Thought I felt something brush past me, like a spider web, a leaf maybe." He tilted his head to listen, and a puff of air blew my flame out, like somebody had made a wish. Now Jay's dim flashlight was the only light we had. Side by side we turned, letting the beam of light cut through the darkness and the thin shadows. We saw nothing except grass, trees, crops, and the hard-packed dirt path as we moved. Doc's cabin seemed miles away. From where we stood, our house looked tiny and impossible to reach. A moment before we completed the circle, the flashlight hit something. It was as if there was a patch of night it couldn't get through. Jay froze, then inch by inch he moved the flashlight back to the way we had come. I was hoping it had been a mistake, that he had taken his finger off the switch for a minute, but the thick darkness ate up the beam again. Then darkness spoke. "Happy birthday." And it reached for us. We screamed, not caring that anyone heard, and turned to run back to the house and to Mama. As we sprinted, a crackling sound came from behind us like someone stepping on dry leaves. The flashlight showed how far we were away from safety. "Not gonna make it home," I panted. "Doc's," Jay huffed and turned off the path. A heartbeat later, and he wrenched open the door to Doc's cabin. We both fell inside, slammed the door behind us, and lowered the bolt. The door thudded like someone was pounding on it from the outside, but it didn't give. Jay and I huddled together, listening to the banging and the rattling of the lock. I set the lamp down. Then we broke apart to search for something to protect us. "Gotta be some potion here to get rid of that thing," I said, searching through drawers and on shelves. The shelves were lined with bottles and jars, maybe hundreds of them in all different sizes. Some brown, some blue, all glass. I wished I knew more about what they all did. "But what is it?" Jay's voice was strained tight with fear, and it cracked on the last word. "I don't know. I kept scrabbling through the items in Doc's cabin, searching for the dirt, the brick dust and the graveyard dirt. Do you see any?" Jay held up jar after jar to his flashlight, dropping them all back into the baskets he plucked them from. "Nothing. What do we do?" He had a smudge of dust on his dark brown cheek, and his lower lip trembled. I expect I looked the same. I squeezed his arm. "We need to find something. We can't let that thing get us." "It ain't going to get us, Jesse. I'm going to give it a good licking with this." He hit his palm with a flashlight, testing its weight. A wooden walking cane lay in a corner. When I picked it up, I saw the tip of it had been whittled sharp. I didn't know why Doc would sharpen a cane, but it would make a good weapon. I tested it by making little jabs at the air. When I saw my arm, I realized I wasn't wearing the devil's shoestrings bracelet Doc made for me. I'd taken it off before I went to sleep. I wanted to kick myself. "Let's go get it," Jay said, moving towards the door. I pulled him away. Don't get too close. That's when the banging fell silent. We pressed ourselves against the back of the cabin and waited, both of us with our heads cocked, listening. There was nothing. Then, just when our breathing was getting back to normal, we heard something under our feet, scraping. The floor rattled back and forth as if someone was shaking it. Jay raised his flashlight above his head to use like a hammer. I braced my feet apart, shoving the point of the walking stick outward. I told myself that I'd use it. I was sure I could. Maybe. Me and Jay looked at each other, then back down to the shaking floor. I heard a crack like the bolt on a door sliding open. The floor shifted again, then a part of it slowly began to rise up. My arm was shaking like a leaf in a storm, but I held the cane fast and pulled my arm back. My only thought was, you can do this, Jezebel. You have to protect yourself. The trapdoor in the floor opened all the way, and Doc's head rose up from its depths. Kids? I was so relieved to see it was our uncle that my whole body sagged. I had to lean against the wall for support. To my right, I heard Jay's breath coming out in a long, low whistle. Then I realized I was still holding the cane out, and Jay still had the flashlight. Doc stared at both of us and said, "Looks like we might need to have a little talk, huh? Pretty sure you have something important to tell me." Slowly we lowered the weapons, and Doc eased himself out of the cellar. He let the flap fall back down, and the hatch disappeared into the rest of the dusty, gritty floor. I didn't know his cabin had any space underneath it, and from the look on Jay's face, he didn't either. Doc sat at his work table and emptied his pockets. A few clear bottles with cloudy liquid in them, some dried branches, and a balled-up brown paper bag. He laid the things out in a pattern particular to him and hummed a soft, little light tune I hadn't heard before. After a while, he said, "Well, I'm waiting." Dinah jumped up and ran off. "We was following Jessie's doll." Doc waved his hands to stop us from speaking at once. Wait, easy now, one at a time. I can't hear myself think when y'all are chattering like magpies." Jay looked at me, then started talking. When me and Jessie was at the marsh earlier today, she said something talked to her. Then she got stuck in the mud and couldn't get out. Then after we went to bed, she woke me up and said we had to follow her crazy doll down the path, and something in the marsh ate the light from the flashlight and then chased us into here. He took a deep breath like he was going to say more, then he clamped his lips shut. Doc sat there, hands still, looking at Jay while he talked. He always liked to give a person's story his full attention. Then he turned to me, his eyes all serious but calm. "Is that right?" I nodded, and it talked to us. It wished us a happy birthday. "What about getting stuck in the marsh?" For a minute I didn't say anything, even though I knew I had to. "Well, I got stuck in the mud. It was like the marsh held me still and wouldn't let me loose. But I figured it out, Doc. We used one of the blue paint sticks to get me out." I took a deep breath. "So there's really nothing to worry about. You can still keep teaching us root work." If Doc was angry with us about what happened, he didn't show it. He just asked, What about then? Did you hear anything when you were stuck?" Jay and I shared a look. I heard a voice, clear as day, saying it was time. "Time? He stroked his graying beard. "Did it hurt you?" From the way he said the word hurt, I knew the answer was important. I'd been scared, but no, it didn't hurt me. "Okay," Doc said, "but did it feel like it wanted to hurt you? This is important for both of you." He glanced at Jay. "But women folk mostly trust what they feel more than men folk. It's called intuition. Think hard, Jezebel. Did you feel somewhere deep inside that it was going to hurt you?" Intuition, I never heard the word before, but I knew what Doc meant. Oftentimes I heard Mama and even Gran say they could feel things. Mama could feel when rain was coming on, when something was wrong with me or Jay, when someone was trying to fake her out at the market, charging a higher price than what was right. And Gran knew, she always said she knew, not that she felt, when someone was guilty or innocent. One time we heard on the radio that Mr. Mackey from the garage got arrested for stealing, and she said the police had the wrong man. Turned out she was right. I closed my eyes and tried to remember through my fear. In my mind, I pulled away the layer of strangeness that had covered everything. Was it bad? Did I feel I was being hateful? "Time," it had said. "It's time." The voice was one I didn't know, and it sounded like speaking was hard for it, like trying to walk through the knee-high mud in the marsh. Whatever it was hadn't hurt me, and I knew that if I had wanted to, it could have easily done so. But instead, it had kept me still and made me listen. I thought of the words of the song we sang in church, "Peace, be still." No, it didn't mean me harm. We were running around so much, hollering and everything, I wasn't paying attention. I looked over at Jay, who was giving me a strange look like he'd never seen me before. It wanted me to listen. Have you been listening lately? I've been trying, I said, and pulled a loose string on the hem of my dress. I know you have. Doc gathered both of us together in a hug then. I'd been so scared I was going to get in trouble. The doc was going to say he couldn't teach us anymore because it was too dangerous. I slumped into his hug with relief. Jay squirmed to get free. Doc, what was it out there? You must know. My brother crossed his arms in front of his chest and stuck his lower lip out. Doc reached for his pipe. I know you grew up seeing me and Gran make potions and such all your lives, but there are things in this world you haven't never experienced before. Doc let out a heavy breath. Your mother didn't want me doing spirit work around you two, and I never did. Never talked about most of the other parts of the brute work, hexes, spirits, and creatures from the next. She wanted you to go to school and get real jobs rather than feeling like you had no choice but this life. He smiled, but it seemed sad. Looks like even though I hadn't introduced you to this aspect of root work, things got outside of my control. My mother was right. I needed to prepare you kids for this world, and I didn't do that properly. Anyone can learn recipes and rituals, but not everyone has a natural connection to the earth and the creatures that share our world. He nudged at me at the same time. That's something both of you have in different ways. You're new, so it's delicate, but it's strong. Doc turned up the wick on his hurricane lamp, an old oil one with a tall glass cover to protect the light when it was windy. The cabin got brighter, and my worry faded some in the warm light. I wanted to wait to tell you both about the true world of root work, but seems like an expert thinks it's time you both know. The only person I knew who had more root understanding than Doc was Gran. Everyone on the island knew that. I didn't know that what expert he was talking about, but at that moment I wished so much that Gran could have been here to teach me alongside Doc. Before Gran died, I used to climb into her big bed and tell her my dreams. Once, after she heard one of my dreams about a crow and a crab, she got quiet. She took a deep breath and told me I'd do great things one day, but before I did, I was going to have troubles. I don't know if all this is what she meant, but this was definitely trouble. I crossed my arms in front of me. Who is this expert? I asked, suspicious. Doc said, you two need to talk with your grandmother. Our mouths dropped open. What? It's a lot to introduce to you in one day, Doc said. But sometimes we can speak to those who've passed on, just like we are all speaking to each other now. Other times, ancestors come to us in dreams, or we have to seek them out to ask for their advice. He smiled. This is a very special thing. Your grand crossing to speak to you. It's an honor. Jez? Jay was looking at me, scared. I knew he was scared because I was too. I bit my lip. Rocked back and forth on my heels. It must be hard to cross over. Doc nodded. Takes a lot of energy for a spirit to communicate. Then it would be rude not to talk to her if she came all this way. I took Jay's trembling hand and squeezed it. Right? Right. He squeezed my hand back. And Gran always made time to spend with us. We can spend time with her. Proud of y'all, Doc said as he stood up and walked over to the cabin's front door. He lifted the wooden bolt and opened it. We held our breath. The dark shape from the woods lay flat on the ground outside. It rose, hovering at the door frame before carefully folding itself inside. It touched my hands, then my head and shoulders. I wasn't so scared this time, but I stayed still, unsure what would happen next. The shadow didn't feel cold or evil. It felt curious and somehow pleased. I did the same with Jay, and while he scrunched away from it at first, he eventually relaxed and let go. Once he did, everything changed. The dark shape fluttered and flapped, then it folded itself again and again until it was a rectangle as small as the palm of my hand. Then it fell on the floor. From within the dark rectangle, another shape rose up. This one was a shadow shaped like a person. As it floated up and out of the shape on the floor, I smelled the scent of lemon and pine. Then came gardenias and bean candy, all bubbling sugar and toasty seeds. It was grand smell. The shadow stood there unmoving. Stars twinkled within the dark shape. Without thinking, I raced over and hugged the shadow. It felt like her too, warm and solid, with a little softness under a long, dark, crisp skirt. I couldn't believe it. All of a sudden, I felt her intensely, smart and wise in how she knew. She always knew the right thing to say, no matter what. She protected us, loved us, gave us everything she had, everything she loved. Stories and songs and recipes and magic, and I missed her so much. I mumbled into her skirt. I must move. Her chuckle was a soft and gentle puff against the top of my head. It was comforting, like a fire when you come in from a walk in the cold. Then she spoke. I miss you too, my Jezebel. Her voice was exactly the same, and I would know it anywhere. Jay came up beside me. Hi, Gran, he said, and reached out to her. Hi, Jaybird. Gran's arms wrapped around us, and she hugged us both. When her shadowy self lifted, she raised us up too. We clung onto her while she swung us in midair. It was flying and getting hugged at the same time, and it was perfect. When she set us back down on the ground, we were full of questions. How'd you get here? Is this real magic? Can we do it? How long can you stay? Didn't matter that me and Jay talked at the same time and talked over each other. Gran just sparkled even more. Maybe because we weren't scared anymore. I done walk, swim, and fly to get here, but I wouldn't miss this birthday. You's 11 now, and that's momentous. I could feel her smile and her happiness. Ah, yes, it's real magic. And you can do it if you work hard. I couldn't see Gran's face clear within the shadow. Instead, she looked as though she was in front of a candlelight in a dark room when she thanked us in Gullah. Tinky, she said. Volandisja rut. How long can you stay? I asked her. Again, Jezebel. Doc's voice had a warning in it. It's all right, Gran said to Doc. These cheering gotta know. Gran bent down in front of me and Jay. She was still in shadow, but her eyes and her smile sparkled with love. I must go, she said. Gran kissed me on the forehead, then Jay. But remember this, Hasi de famble. Raise the family. How do we do that? I don't understand. Gran was usually patient with us and explained things when we asked her. Her words now made me confused, like I should know something I didn't. You will, she said. When the time come, know I love y'all here. Once more she hugged us tight, then she stepped back onto that black rectangle. As the dark shape began to fade, we heard her voice one more time. We're going to see each other again, you know, one day. Oh, and Jezebel, better leave your window open for Dinah. After that, she was gone, but I could still feel her kiss on my forehead, still smell her scent like perfume on the air. My heart felt like it was growing inside me, and it was so full of love and joy. I wanted to spin around and around until I was dizzy. She told us being 11 was special, momentous, and it already was. I wanted to hold this moment inside me forever, but it was time for us to go back to bed. Doc ushered us out of his cabin, and we headed back inside quiet as we could. Jay yawned and climbed under the bedspread. I sat on my pillow, remembering. Something had opened up in me, a huge deep well that wanted to be filled. I knew now why learning my family's magic was so important. There was more to root work than I'd ever imagined, more than the kids at school could understand, more than Deputy Collins could scare out of us, and I was ready to learn it all. I was tired, but I felt better than I had since Gran passed away. I raised the window a little more like Gran asked for Dinah to get in, then I climbed under the covers. I think I can do this, I whispered to the night. It's scary, but exciting too. I love knowing that I'm doing things the people in my family, even 100 years ago, used to do. I lay back on my bed and said my prayers for the health and happiness of everyone in the family, making sure to still include Gran. When I looked over at Jay, he had his face smashed into the pillow, already asleep. Soft light from the moon and stars came through the sheer curtains into our room, making patterns on my bedspread that I traced with my finger. Sounds of the marsh filtered in through the cracked open window. Frogs croaking, cicadas singing, and the call of screech owls. My eyelids got heavy. This is going to be a big, important year, I whispered to myself before I fell asleep, too.